and I'm going to share from my screen.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. How's it going? Good to see you. Sorry about the slight delay. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're going to try to get this going here. Just about there. Let's see, I think we got a couple more that are trying to get in here. All right, we'll go ahead and get this going, and then I think I've got it set so everybody can get in as they need to. All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining in. Just wanted to say good morning. Let everybody know that this is Eric Barker. I'm the branch sales and operations manager at Integrity. And we're super excited to have kind of this E-rate discussion meeting today. We've got Jim on the call here with us today. He'll be our main presenter. And then we've also got Rich. He's our president and CEO at Integrity.
Good morning, everyone.
And just wanted to kind of set off some expectations of what to kind of, plan for, expect everything. We're going to start our webinar just kind of with some introductions here. And then we're going to hand it off to Jim. He's going to talk we scheduled 45 minutes, but we talked with Jim earlier this week. He's like, maybe 35. We'll kind of see. So we'll kind of see where he lands. But definitely just be writing down some questions for a Q&A at the end. You can put them in the chat. There's a Q&A section there. We can also use that. So feel free to either write that down or submit those in the chat, and we'll try to have a good Q&A session at the end. It is my pleasure to introduce Jim. Jim's the technology marketing and has technology and marketing experience that spans more than 40 years, including project management, voice and data communications, facilities and wiring design, systems integration, and financial analysis. But for the last 25 years, he's focused particularly in the FCC's E-rate program and the K-12 education sector. Since 2009, Jim has been the principal consultant and owner of KB and Associates, which provides E-rate marketing and consulting services, as well as access to their software as a service, E-rate ProfitWorks, which is a service for providers and manufacturers. In just 2004, Jim's clients were awarded over $350 million in E-rate applications, which is a testament to his expertise and his impact in the field. So just a little background on Jim. If you've never heard of Jim, we wanted to kind of give you a little background story there. So without any further ado, Jim, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Eric, and good morning. I'll always preface this by a little bit of more background. So my first introduction to E-rate and the Universal Service Fund was in 1998. I was actually working as a consultant for applicants at that point in time. And from 1998 until 2009, when I formed KB and Associates, I was an applicant consultant. So I worked in needs assessment through acquisition and implementation project management on large-scale E-rate infrastructure deals, and had quite a bit of background in doing that. So I kind of have my fingers in three different pies, if you will: the applicant side, the FCC, and the legal side of this, the compliance side of all of this. On behalf of my applicant clients back in the day, as well as we were retained by law firms to help them figure out E-rate problems in public sector in the state of California early on in this process. So kind of that, and also I understand the vendor and manufacturer side pretty well because I worked for them before. So I have a unique background. Let me preface it all by saying that I am not your consultant, nor am I a consultant to applicants in any way, shape, or form. This is not designed to help you in your application process. I'm only here to deliver some information, much like USAC would, in a very, unbiased way, if you will. Certainly I have bias, and I have to be very careful in how I provide this information, but suffice it to say, take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I, again, am not your consultant. And with that caveat, let me share my screen and let's go through some death by PowerPoint slides this morning. So there's some interesting things that have happened. We understand that there's category 1 and category 2. We're primarily going to focus on category 2 throughout this, simply because that's what Integrity Network Solutions does. And so why not, right? But we're going to focus on the internal connections, basic maintenance on internal connections, and managed internal broadband services. Before we dig into that, just kind of a universal statement, if you will: E-rate is not dead. And in fact, if you go to the lower left-hand corner, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that the Universal Service Fund, of which E-rate is a part of, was constitutional. So they actually heard the case back in January, February, and then ruled on it on the 26th of June. And in it, they resoundingly codified the fact that the Universal Service Fund, the FCC's program, as defined by Congress in the Telecommunications Act, is constitutional. So the way that the funds are collected is constitutional, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it ain't going anywhere anytime soon. Now, nibbling around the edges of this thing, Wi-Fi hotspots and bus Wi-Fi are there's challenges afoot in a variety of areas, but we don't see those challenges being very successful. The FCC currently is pretty much hamstrung, if you will. There are only 2 FCC commissioners in place as of about a month ago. 2 Republican commissioners resigned. So we don't know what's happening as far as that goes. We haven't seen nominees that have been formally announced by the current administration. So at this point in time, the FCC has no capabilities to really do anything of any kind of import. So that's they don't even have a quorum. They don't even have 3 commissioners to do anything. So kind of interesting situation at this point in time. We also see that Congress has released, in the center column under Congressional bottom USF, Congress has yet to receive or to resolve the Universal Service Fund reformation. The way the funds are collected today off of your phone bills, that line item that says Universal Service Fee, is unfairly impacting lower income folks because they have to pay the same fee. And so you and I probably don't have too much of a problem with a couple bucks here and there kind of thing. A lot of people do. And so they're trying to restructure that so that the payment comes back like it used to from the telecommunications companies. Now it would come back through potentially internet service providers, et cetera, the people with the big bucks, or those people that have big presence on the net, the Googles and Amazons and those kinds of folks. So we'll see what happens, but that's where this is going. So the Category 2 budget rules were announced recently, and they increased the amount by the cost of living. I predicted $200, and it was $201.57 per student over the 5-year period. So if you have 1,000 students, you're now at $201,570 times the 85% discount at the highest level of discount And so you can have that $171,000 in support. For libraries, it's $5.43 per square foot. And you can utilize that over the next 5 years as you see fit. You can take it all at once in a large network refresh, as an example, and then support it over the next couple of years by a smaller, much smaller amount for support, if you will. But suffice it to say, you can break it out however you see deem fit. But it's a really good idea to plan for the next 5 years if you possibly can. And we're going to talk more about that and how to maybe strategize that over the next umpteen months, if you will. So they also increased the budget floor for those very small school districts or with 10 sites or less. And that's not very small, but that's medium small size, if you will. But with few students per site, they also have a budget floor of $30,175. So that gives folks with very, very small sites an outsized budget for that site based on the number of students. We are saying this is potentially the Category 2 eligible services list for this coming funding year. This is what was 2025. So we do not see any major changes to this thing happening this year. So your standard firewalls, cabling infrastructure, wireless LAN and LAN infrastructure, and UPSs are all eligible. That didn't translate very well, but the virtualized cloud applications obviously are eligible. And notice that I have under manufacturer's multi-year warranty for a period up to 3 years that is provided as an integral part of an eligible component. That's long speak or lawyer speak for if it's included for the price, the warranty is included for the price of either the software or the hardware with no discernible separation of that price. It is eligible for up to 3 years is the way the law reads. However, they fund, I've seen as much as 10 years. Meraki, for instance, at one point had a 10-year license. Why would anybody buy a 10-year license? I'm not sure, but they did, and E-Rate paid for it. So we'll see what happens. And then management software is eligible under managed internal broadband services. So some of these licenses that include cloud management capabilities, and there are a number of manufacturers that do that. I would suggest that you try and place those licenses under managed internal broadband services where they're 100% eligible as opposed to partially eligible under internal connections. Basic maintenance of internal connections, and this is always a bugaboo, if you will. Unfortunately, for a lot of folks get hung up on this, but so there's 2 sections under basic maintenance of internal connections, even further confusing the thing. There's the repair and upkeep of eligible hardware, wire and cable management and maintenance, and configuration changes. Those are T&M basis. And so you collect your receipts for the year and figure out what you think your costs for that level of support are going to be for the next year. And you do an estimate of charges. And then as those events occur, you will bill on a T&M basis, or the system will reimburse you on a T&M basis or time and materials basis for those actions. Under the other section, which is the green stuff, is the basic technical support and online and telephone support. Typically, these are your manufacturer support SKUs. Again, these are not part of the license. These are standalone support SKUs. And some manufacturers still have not bundled their warranty or post-warranty after the first 3 years of license that you buy. You may have to buy a separate support SKU. If that is the case, that's where this falls. And again, it's not a license. It's purely this manufacturer's support. And then we run into managed internal broadband services. And this is the stuff that is provided by a third party for the operation, management, and monitoring of internal connections. That list that we looked at earlier. It's the eligible expenses that directly support and are necessary for broadband connectivity, LAN, wireless LAN, including installation, activation, and initial configuration of the eligible components. What this is saying is that you can ask Integrity to come onto your site, install the equipment, lease it to you. You don't have to pay up front for it. You can do it over a 5-year period, and they can manage it and operate and monitor it for you for the next 5 years in a single package. You are leasing the equipment from them. You pay them on an annual basis. And there are more and more manufacturers that are supporting this network as a service kind of look and feel. So you can guarantee a single price tag on an annual basis for the next 5 years, paid for through E-Rate. So making sure that you're asking for the correct thing under the correct category of service is kind of challenging, but I try and break it down. And I know this is a busy slide, but for basic maintenance, hardware and software, and this licensing and the maintenance, or excuse me, hardware, software, and licenses are not eligible. The maintenance, i.e., reconfigurations, cable maintenance, et cetera, and then the manufacturer support are all eligible under basic maintenance, but those are the only things. Then again, internal connections, you can cover hardware, software, licensing, the manufacturer support if it's built into that licensed or that software hardware. And then again, configuration of net new equipment, training during the installation are all eligible under internal connections. And then under managed internal broadband services, you can do the most of any of those three with both the hardware and the software and the license, as well as monitoring, as well as configuration of new equipment, training during installation, the operation, and the management are all eligible under managed internal broadband services. And make sure that you take into account the notes must be on an estimate of annual troubles billed on a T&M basis. Note 2 may be rent, lease, or one-time purchase. So you can do a one-time upfront purchase under managed internal broadband services. There is a one-time cost column in there, and then the support include for the operation management and the installation. So, and then eligible for internal connections if included for the price of the hardware software. Not eligible as a separate line item for that note 3 under internal connections manufacturer support. So I try and break down process as much as possible into kind of packages. So between now and February, hopefully you're doing your needs assessment. The eligible services list will be released sometime in November. The application window is typically announced right about then as well. Typically, the 471 application window will open in January and close at the end of March. And then your Form 470 and RFP should be filed at that point in time, or as early on in the process. And there was an old a gentleman by the name of John Noren, who was a director at the USAC, used to have a famous saying, file early and file often. The earlier, the better that you can file, because let's say that you discover that you needed something you hadn't filed for in the last minute. Don't wait and try and bundle it all up together at one time. It's much better if you can file early. And if you file early in the application cycle, the application window, your application is much more likely to be get a funding commitment decision letter prior to that July 1 date. And then January through March, your Form 471 filing, you're going to revise your student data early on. Typically, they close the administrative window sometime in mid-January. Conduct that fair, open, and competitive bidding process, with price being the most heavily weighted factor in your evaluation. Again, not low qualified bid, but subjective. Hopefully, you're taking into account your relationships with your service provider partners. Select that service provider, execute an agreement. There's some new information has come out about whether that needs to be a formal contract or something in writing announcing award is acceptable. We like to see ink on paper. That way it just codifies it and solidifies the agreement, and won't be any questions down the road when you actually have your funding commitment decision letter. File that Form 471, and then it goes through the PIA process. The very first thing that happens is you get a receipt acknowledgement letter. My recommendation is to, at that point, make sure that your bill of materials on your agreement or what was the proposal absolutely matches what is on the Form 471 FRN line items. If it doesn't, fix it through the receipt acknowledgement letter correction or RAL correction process during the PIA review, not waiting until the funding commitment decision letter is issued. That's absolutely the worst case, because it just delays things 60, 90-day type processes. Issue the PO if required. Form 486 is filed for the receipt of services acknowledgement, and then you can begin your implementation and your invoicing. So some best practices. We really encourage applicants to apply for all 3 subcategories of internal connections on the same Form 470 for all the services that you're seeking. So if you're buying 100 wireless LAN access points, include those on internal connections, managed internal broadband services, and basic maintenance. It takes an extra 2 or 3 minutes to do that on the Form 470 application, but it's highly recommended because, in fact, if there is a hiccup, something gets put in the wrong bucket for some reason, it's very easy to fix it during the RAL correction and or the PIA process, but it's almost impossible to fix after the fact, after a funding commitment decision letter is issued. And what typically, the way that we hate to have folks find this out is everything's going great, you get it installed, and your partner goes to invoice, your service provider partner, or you go to invoice on a BEAR and you attach that invoice to the BEAR invoicing application, and it gets kicked back with a partial payment because there was a line item that was incorrect. Literally, it's almost impossible to fix it at that point in time. And then make sure that basic maintenance is under specifically these manufacturer support SKUs. If you buy a multi-year, you have to apply each year of a multi-year. So if it's a 3-year support SKU and you're applying for it, you can only apply for 33 1/3% per year over the 3-year period. Now, it's advantageous from a pricing standpoint to buy that 3-year, but the trade-off is that you're probably going to have to invoice by a BEAR because you're buying a 3-year in effect license or support SKU. Your partner is going to expect that money up front, and then you get the benefits of that price, but you're going to have to pay for it. So again, applicant must apply each year. Make sure that VMIC, excluding the T&M break fixes and MIBS line items, are submitted as one-time costs and not monthly. So it does have in there months of service, but make sure that you deploy it as a one-time cost and not a monthly. This way you can submit the BEAR invoice at the beginning of the cycle and invoice USAC as soon as an FCDL is issued. Under the Managed Internal Broadband Services one-time cost, you can also do that broken out year over year, and that I would suggest is not necessarily a requirement for the BEAR invoicing. And make sure that support services like premium, standard, backline are submitted under basic maintenance of internal connections. So here's one on integrity. Make sure to require that the service provider submits a bulk upload template with each category of service proposed. That should be just a baseline requirement in your Form 470. And the reason I suggest that is it's hitting the easy button. Those bulk upload templates are uploadable into the Form 471 as a one-time. You don't have to mess around with finger boning in every line item. And that's just a recipe for, one time, one digit off and one thing can mess up the whole thing. So much easier just to upload the template and put that on your service provider partner. And that way they're going to make sure that it's accurate and everything matches. Again, document retention for 10 years after the date of installation. Anything associated with this process, emails, proposals, quotes, purchase orders, asset management information, invoices, all the good stuff. And then minimize redundancy and high availability. Redundant services are not eligible under E-rate, and high availability always gets questioned. So when you buy a product that has high availability listed in it, even though you may be buying it, 2 of them, one for one site and one for another site, and they have this high availability capability between the 2 sites, try and limit that as much as possible because it's just going to mess with the reviewer's mind, if you will. Bidding process. Again, it must be fair, open, and competitive. It is not acceptable if the service provider and or the manufacturer with the service provider provides an explicit bill of materials to an applicant that is subsequently used in your RFP. In other words, copy and pasting the bill of materials that you get from your service provider partner into your RFP is considered the service provider helping you with that RFP, and that's a violation of the fair, open, and competitive rules. You are allowed to state a specific product. So if you're going to your partner and saying, hey, listen, I really need some sort of budgetary number so I can know what I'm dealing with. It can say, you need 250 wireless access points. They should be Wi-Fi 7, 4x4. That's pretty generic. And then, here's our recommendation for that specific product. Here's the data sheet on that specific product. You are allowed to say, I want 250 of that particular product or equivalent in your Form 470 in your RFP. But now you have 250 of this, 10 of that, 16 of that in a generic format with a budgetary number. That's not a violation of E-rate rules. Beyond that, it becomes helping you with your RFP. And again, if there's a specific product named either in the Form 470 or RFP, the words equivalent, equal, or compatible must be included. Where it says compatible, that should be because you already have that product in your network. As an example, you have 250 wireless access points and you need 100 more for another new site or something like that. And you're allowed to say must be compatible with my existing network. Again, you must have enough specificity in the Form 470 for your partner to bid it, or else have an RFP. There's only so much information you can get in the Form 470. There's a lot, but it's only so much. You need technical drawings, site plans, etc., or network design stuff, or information that's more prolific than what's in the Form 470. Then you have to have an RFP. You must answer technical questions during the 28-day bidding process, and then you have to document the selection process with some sort of a bid score sheet or evaluation matrix, whatever you want to call it. And then price must be the most heavily weighted or primary factor, considering only eligible services. What does that look like? Typically, 30-40% of the evaluation is price, and then the remaining are objective and subjective. Here's what it looks like. So in this instance, notice that vendor 3 in the final column had a higher price than vendor 2, with 30% of the decision being price. But he still won because he had the relationship or prior experience. His price for ineligible services and products was better than his competitors, and he had flexible invoicing, and he was local or in-state. Maybe not the most local or in-state, but he was local or in-state or qualified in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, that's the clear winner. So again, objective and subjective evaluation criteria are more than acceptable. Some just basic rules that everybody should be adhering to. Nothing of value in excess of $20 in any single transaction to you as an individual from a service provider. So if you and Rich and Eric, all three, go out to lunch and Eric picks up the tab one time for 20 bucks, and the next time Rich picks up the tab for 20 bucks, you're within the guideline limits. The next lunch better not cost more than $20 per person or $10 per person, because that will equate to $50 from Integrity Network Solutions to you. Again, nothing of value in excess of $50 in any year, and then cups, pens, that sort of thing are fine. And just be careful on site what you accept. If you go to a statewide technology meeting, as an example, oftentimes vendors like to give away big prizes. Make sure that you're not taking one of those. Another one that's kind of controversial at this point in time because there is no clear guidance. This is Jim Kerr, E-Rate Profit Works, KB and Associates guidance. According to the latest training sessions and guidance in verbal statements, product demos outside of the 470 competitive bidding period are allowed within reason. In 120 days, 3 months is 4 months is acceptable. 6 months starts to look like a gift, and they're going to start getting kind of weird about it if that thing is sitting there for 6 months and it's worth more than 50 bucks. Demos and evals during the 470 period are possibly limited, and notice I said possibly limited, to 15 days. This was information supplied at a USAC training 2 years ago, as a verbal guidance, and we are saying this is a best practice. So during that 28 days, if you've got a piece of hardware or software that you're utilizing as a demo, make sure you get it back to them and track that within a reasonable period of time, and it shouldn't be there during the competitive bidding process. We are not allowed to help you, but if anybody wants to throw rocks at anything I've said this morning, feel free to contact us. We're here and we're happy to discuss it. And thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. Was there anyone that had any questions? If there are, you can feel free to post those in the chat or the Q&A. Raise your hand. I can unmute your mic. Any way that you'd like to do that, we can do that.
Eric, I'm not seeing anything in the chat or the Q&A right now. We'll give a couple minutes in case we've got some questions coming in. One of the things I thought I might ask about, Jim, was I know we focused today's conversation on category 2, but I know some of the folks that are joining may not be as versed in E-rate as someone like yourself. Can you just briefly tackle the conversation of what the differences are between category 1 E-rate spend and category 2?
Sure. So category 1 is your telecommunications services. So internet access, the pipe for the internet, so the connection or connectivity to the ISP, and your wide area networking solutions, your WAN connectivity, whether that be a SD-WAN or that be a hard pipe between sites, however you decide to deploy that, is eligible under category 1, which is the telecommunications services and internet access. That is where also your bus Wi-Fi and where your Wi-Fi hotspots reside. So for take home for Wi-Fi hotspots, school bus Wi-Fi is eligible, and we encourage you to take a look at that as well. But that's category 1, and those are your telecommunications services. And I should state that if you have the pipe to the internet and the internet service provider and a pipe to each location via the internet or ISP, and then you do SD-WAN, the actual SD-WAN software component and routing is actually resides in category 2 internal connections. So that's a little confusing. Another one is that the termination gear for that wide area network and or that ISP, i.e. some sort of routing device or switch to terminate those least dark fiber solutions, is also, that hardware is also, and software is also eligible under telecommunications or category 1 services. Category 2 is the internal connections. I like to differentiate it as anything that sits beyond the property line or inside the property line, I should say, on your campuses is category 2 internal connections. So that's your cabling infrastructure. So low voltage cabling. Again, when we say low voltage cabling, we have to differentiate network low voltage cabling versus physical security and building automation low voltage cabling, which is not eligible under E-rate. But if you're running a conduit, a subterranean conduit between 2 buildings, as an example, and you happen to be pulling all your low voltage cabling through that pipe, you can cost allocate that pipe as an example and say that this is half everything, half the network, and the other half of that is for non-eligible services. So it gets interesting as a conversation. But your switching, your wireless access points, your caching server, firewall, UPSs, and cabling infrastructure are generally eligible under internal connections.
Thanks, Jim. Joe did have a question. It seems like that maybe you answered some of it with the SD-WAN, but it sounds a little bit more category 1. He says, any idea if there's any type of backup internet solution and if it would be eligible for any type of E-rate funding? So as a secondary internet connection.
No, single point of entry is the only thing that is eligible. A backup, or redundant pipe back out to the internet on, let's say you want to avoid cable cuts, so you have 2 entry points on your campus. The second one is not eligible under E-rate. You cannot have what are called duplicative services.
Excellent question.
On the actual connection wouldn't be, but if there is an SD-WAN feature in the firewall would be E-ratable as SD-WAN features.
Correct.
E-ratable.
Yes. So both the basic firewall services, again, there's a whole laundry list of things under firewall, what we would consider a next-gen firewall that are not eligible. But the basic firewall services and some of the components like sandboxing, sandboxing is as an example because that's a basic firewall component. But for instance, content filtering is not eligible. DNS services are eligible. Advanced threat prevention is not eligible on a firewall. So it gets ugly. Firewalls are confusing. And it's amazing how many people don't utilize this internal connections for the purchase of a firewall. And we highly suggest to plan that, because obviously you have to have one. You need a robust one, and E-rate will pay for quite a bit of it. But the SD-WAN component of that routing device, either that a firewall or another SD-WAN application, is eligible under internal connections category 2.
And what will help you with that submission for your firewall is that most manufacturers, I won't say all, but most manufacturers offer a percentage of eligibility for any given product that they offer. So once you have that, you can ask for what percentage of this appliance is E-rate eligible. And so that'll help give you that idea too, because again, some feature sets on these next gen firewalls are eligible, some are not. And so the manufacturers, realizing that question needs to be answered, will give a percentage of eligibility to their products.
As a consultant that represents numerous firewall or cybersecurity manufacturers, I can tell you that the good ones all have this posted up and is readily available information.
Yeah, agreed.
I have to be somewhat manufacturer agnostic in that conversation, but I'm more than a little familiar with like 6 or 7 of them. So
yeah.
Joe said thanks, so hopefully that kind of answered everything he had. Kevin said he didn't have a question, but just wanted to let everybody know that it was super informative and he really appreciated everything.
Yeah, excellent.
Oh, he actually did post something. Does the manufacturer set that percentage of E-rate eligibility on a given product?
Yes, it is set by the manufacturer, believe it or not. E-rate, they look at it, but a USAC looks at it, but it's self-reported. And the way that it's discerned is by self-reporting by the manufacturer, and having done this for those manufacturers in numerous situations, there's a reasonableness test. So as you go through the various features of a firewall and the various components of that firewall, and yes, no, and come up with a percentage. The basic premise is that a firewall is a firewall, and its basic is eligible. And then from there, you start adding and deleting eligibility by component or by service type.
Yeah, and so the manufacturers, most, again, as Jim said, there's a lot of different options out there, but most of the firewall manufacturers, there's a bit of a percentage variation based on, you can go all the way back to, I'm just buying the hardware. A simple no-go firewall, the old school firewalls, are 100% eligible. And then as you start stacking services, some services are, some services aren't, some services are partial, some support is, some support isn't, some support is partial. And so as you say, I'm looking for this appliance with these services and 3 years of support versus 5 years of support versus 1 year of support, you'll find they all have a kind of sliding scale of percentage eligibility. So where Jim mentioned that firewalls can get complicated, that is true. but the manufacturers understand that complication, and they've done their back end work to make it easier. I didn't say easy, I just said easier for us and you. So there's a lot of pieces to that when we talk about firewalls, and we're glad to help with kind of clarifying any of that if that helps you going forward. No problem.
All right. And again, Kevin said thank you for that. Any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand or just throw it in the chat, whatever's easier for you. We'll give a little bit.
Look at that, Jim. We're giving 4 minutes back to them. So that's always better than we've got, we're over 4 minutes and we still have 10 minutes to cover. So we'll try to give that time back to you. Eric, I'll go ahead and let you wrap up. I just want to say thanks to everybody for taking the time out of your day.
Yeah, for sure.
We definitely hope that the information that we've provided is beneficial and helpful to you as you step into the 2026 E-rate season. Feel free to reach out. As Jim mentioned, his contact information is there. You know how to get a hold of myself and Eric. We're glad to help in any way we can get this E-rate season rolling for you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Best of luck this year. Take care.